This is MFG Out Loud. Courageous conversations about sales and marketing for today's manufacturers. With your hosts, Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore.
Hey, Trailblazers. Thanks for joining us for another courageous conversation about sales and marketing for manufacturers. Today, we have a very special guest. I'm really excited to introduce Mark Roberts. He is the president and founder of OTB Sales Solutions. What do they do, you might ask? Well, he is an anomaly, in my opinion. I've met a lot of sales coaches, consultants in my day, and the moment that this man started talking, I had a feeling that he was very different, very down to earth, and just incredibly, incredibly pragmatic and prolific at the same time. And the thing that I love about what he does for companies, I can give you the whole spiel about OTB Sales Solutions, but what I think is more important is to tell you that they create scalable, repeatable solutions for every member of your organization. So it's not just your sales team, but it's everybody can work together. And I think that's the thing that attracted me the most about him. I think the other thing that is so impressive is that he's the author of a book. You need to pick it up, Branding Backwards. We will put a link to that in the show notes. He's a keynote speaker. I highly recommend him for that, by the way. His demeanor, his cadence, everything about him it's really lovely and engaging. And he's also a trainer, a thought leader on LinkedIn, which of course is one of the ways that I found him besides Mark Mitchell. And his strategic development blog, No Smoke and Mirrors, is no BS. It's the real deal. So I highly suggest you check it out. So Mark Roberts, you are transforming the way people serve, and we are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction, and I look forward to hopefully helping some of your community today.
Well, I have no doubt. Ray, anything you want to say before we...
No, big fan. As always, I've followed Mark on LinkedIn. Follow the blogs. We've had a chance to talk one-on-one, and it's like getting in touch with an old friend and a new mentor. And I know there's a lot of great content coming your way today. So, Mark, we're so glad you're with us today.
Well, thank you.
Well, so let's kick it off. We had a couple of major questions that came up that we wanted to challenge you with. So what do you feel is the biggest challenge you see most manufacturers facing today in terms of sales strategies and structures, right? And this whole idea of selling naked. So we'll just tease people.
Well, what I often see is look at all the changes that we've had in the last 2 to 3 months. However, not many teams have really adjusted a lot of what they've taught their salespeople to do. What I see is, dated value propositions sometimes, maybe a sales process that no longer resonates with their buyers. Think about how much your buyers have changed, right? So I think the biggest challenge for a lot of manufacturers, particularly those that work through distributors or other channel partners, is clearly understanding the voice of their customer and how they buy, what they need to buy today. Because the emphasis on the word today, what was probably true about 3 months ago, their biggest challenge was finding people. Now their biggest challenge is, what do I need to do to survive? Yeah. So all I'm saying is let's make sure we really capture what our accounts want and need today. And this is the best time in the world to double down and call and build those relationships with your customers to understand any shifts that might have happened.
Absolutely. I think another thing that gets lost in translation many times, I've noticed this with with many of my clients over the years, and I know Ray and I have seen this together when we've worked with companies, it's the distributors. So they tend to be forgotten. So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for their distributors that they may be unaware of or overlooking right now?
Well, one of the challenges is if the distributor is actually working with the end user, how are you as a manufacturer capturing what's going on? I'm a huge fan of distributors. Most of the manufacturers that I've served all have distributor networks. But what distributors are facing is almost like the perfect storm. I mean, first there was Amazon getting into their business and aggressively, going after some of their customers. Then we had buyers moving to more of a digital model with as much as 70% of the sales process being over before they even call a salesperson now, right?
Yeah.
And then with the internet, what used to be your biggest competitor was a regional distributor down the street. Your competitor could be in another state, in another country, right? So now we throw on COVID, and what a challenge that's become. A big part of the traditional distributor model has always been face-to-face.
Yeah.
So how are we going to adapt? And how do we adapt in states where we're not even allowed to have people on a job site? Now, that's all starting to change now, but it's been a real challenge for distributors, and not everybody's down. I was speaking with a distributor yesterday in cleaning and safety products, and they've had a record year this year, 40% up over last year. But again, we just like manufacturers, distributors need to make sure and adjust their model based on the market and customer of today.
Mark, how does it change, or how has it changed, or is it changing? Because going back not too many years, it used to be, well, who owned the customer relationship, or who really coveted or protected that? And if the distributor's like, my customer, I don't want my OEMs getting too close to them. They need to go through me. When in reality, some of the more successful models I'm seeing today are a little more hybrid. They're a little more shoulder to shoulder, if you will, where the distributor and the OEM are working. Hey, what can we do together that's in the best interest, of the customer and leads to the best possible result? Are you seeing barriers coming down, or is that still a work in progress?
I've seen some of the most effective relationships being where they work, like you said, shoulder to shoulder, working together. There's a spirit of trust. They clearly understand the value that each other brings. And the reality is, with data today, it doesn't take, even a sales guy like me can figure out who your customers are. If 30% of your orders are drop ships, all I got to do is Google the address, right?
Yeah.
So that whole trust factor is really critical. And if you're going to choose to work with distributors, treat them as a trusted extension of your company. The better that you communicate, the better that you train them. Again, it's absolutely critical that you treat them as like an extension of your company.
Yeah, that's key. That's key.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot we could talk about on that topic, but I want to jump into something that I think people are really going to sink their teeth into, because I think this is something that you said in a previous conversation and it really lit us up. So you think too many salespeople are selling naked. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it was Warren Buffett, and I'm going to probably quote him wrong, but what I heard him say was, you can tell who was swimming naked when the tide goes out. Well, the tide's gone out. When our biggest challenge for a lot of businesses was, how do I keep up with the orders? How do I strategically grow my business? How do I make more strategic acquisitions? Has shifted to, how do I stay in business? How do I keep the lights on for some? And again, about 50% of the businesses, based on a study, are at or buying more than what they did last year. But 50% are down, as much as some are down. A customer that I was talking to yesterday is down 40% to prior.
Wow.
But when I say people are, salespeople are selling naked, what I'm referring to is do they have a current value proposition that resonates with their buyers today? Or is it the same thing you've been saying for 10 or 15 years? If it's the same thing, they're selling naked. If your team is like a lot of sales teams and they were never trained in sales skills, maybe they got a lot of product training, a lot of applications training. You always give them CRM training, right, and systems, but they never had sales skills.
You think
they're selling naked. If they have a website that's a virtual brochure and isn't talking about the problems that you solve and helping people understand with case studies and the economic value that your business provides to buyers, they're selling naked. So you shouldn't be very surprised that they're having a hard time maybe getting meetings. They're not hitting their numbers. I think it's been the last 2 years in a row, it was InsideSales.com has been studying how many salespeople are not hitting their numbers. And it's dropping every year. I mean, it's less and less salespeople are achieving their goals every year. So it's time to do something. We need to pivot and we need to adjust.
You mean to say features and benefits don't work? You can't just lean on that.
Yeah, I call it features and benefit bingo, right? You're sitting in front of a buyer, you keep firing out things, hoping they're going to jump up and go, oh, bingo, I get it. I know how you can help me. No, that doesn't work anymore, right? It never really worked. Yeah. Another way that they sell naked is they're in the wrong role. You have some really good people that maybe are great farmers and they know how to do key account development, but if you're frustrated that they're not hunting, well, that's not how they're wired. Maybe you've got somebody in a farmer role that's a great hunter. And more what we're seeing is we got outside sellers, but what customers really want is more inside sellers. So what we really need to do is not only make sure they're in the right role where they add the most value, but make sure they're trained for that role.
And didn't you may have already said this, so please forgive me if you did. Didn't you say that through a recent survey that only 41% are capable of selling virtually?
Yeah, that's what the average is. The tool that I use has assessed over 2 million people globally, and the number is 41%. 41% can work remotely without any training or coaching. So even a sales guy that's challenged with math can figure out that the vast majority of salespeople right now are struggling unless you've provided them training.
And because I hear of this a lot from a lot of people that I know in the industry, what do you think holds manufacturers back, distributors, fill in the blank, companies in general, from spending the money to formalize a training process for their salespeople? Why would you have, right, bring in all these experts for your legal, right, your accounting, you do it for everything, but people are reluctant to bring in professionals for marketing. I can tell you that firsthand. And second, sales training. Why do you think that they're so reluctant to spend the money to make that investment in their people?
Well, I think first and foremost, most executives will spend money if they believe they'll get an ROI. So a lot of times training isn't designed to be remembered, it's designed to be forgotten. There's something called the forgetting curve. And within 48 hours, if you don't reinforce something that you try to teach as a new skill, it's going to be forgotten.
Yep.
And I think the last time I checked, sales training is a $17 billion business. But if 90% of that is being forgotten in 48 hours, no wonder the president and the CEO don't want to invest in training. So what we really need to do is make sure that your training program is designed the way adults want to learn and have effectively learned. For example, if your training program doesn't have a peer-to-peer component, it's probably not driving as much results as it could have. There's still a lot of companies, particularly manufacturers, who have death by PowerPoint for 10 days. You know, you sit there, it's like the boot camp, and if you can survive with keeping your eyelids open, you graduate. But that's not how adults learn. Within 90 minutes, basically, you're going to be in a brain fog. And we have learning science that teaches us the right ways. We just need to adapt. So the first thing is, I don't think we should be upset that people don't want to invest in training just because they haven't seen a good ROI because the design has been bad. My other favorite one was, well, he runs a $4 billion company. And he told me the reason why I'm not going to invest in you is what if they leave? And I'm like, well, what if they stay? So again, there's that thought process. You know, you could look up all the statistics and how often somebody, you know, switches jobs. But there's ways of even doing training, online, virtual, instructor-led, that, you know, is not nearly as expensive as those programs where you fly everybody into a hotel for 10 days. You got to design the program based on the way people learn.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I think that's kind of a great segue. What I really appreciate about your approach is not only have you lived it and done it, you know, you're not a book theoretician. It's like you've done this yourself for your career to keep a roof over your head for all kinds of different companies. And part of what I love about your model is you're very much data centric in terms of you know, hey, measuring things, and some of it's complex, some of it's very basic. Can you expand a little bit? I think you had mentioned there's like 3 data points you really zero in on to help companies. And give me your take on the use of data in driving your decisions and in managing your sales team. Yeah,
if somebody wants to improve the overall effectiveness of their sales team, what I first start out with is a sales skills assessment, where I look at the salespeople. There's 21 sales competencies that we look at, and one of them is actually the will to sell. About 30% of the people that are in sales shouldn't even be in sales because they don't want to sell. They just landed there somehow. So quickly, we want to find those people that maybe are in the wrong role and put them in a more productive role, like maybe customer service or some other role that's not quota carrying. Trying to think what else that I could help you with. So once you understand the assessment of the skills, I also run an assessment. It's more of a voice of customer survey, where we can go out to your top customers. That's a real short one. We get that done in about 7 days. Or we'll do up to 400 of your customers, and we ask them questions. And we're trying to capture net promoter score, customer satisfaction. Why do they buy? Why don't they buy? What process are they buying? And then the third data set is your data yourself, your transaction data. And I think, like when we had our one-on-one, the one thing that you really seemed to grab onto was something where we look at net profit by customer. Yeah. When you add in the cost of sale, when you look at net profit by customer, about 20% of your customers represent 300% of your profit. Say that again. Yeah, 20% of your customers represent 300% of your profit. Amen. And you're like, okay, there's a guy that doesn't understand math. Well, hang with me. 60% of your customers are break even. And then 20% of your customers, every time you ship them, you're losing money. When you add the cost of sale. So what we look at is, let's run the data. Let's consider the cost of sale. Not only look at the structure of the sales team, but let's look at how we serve our customers to maximize our overall profitability and customer experience. And then last, of course, is always training. Yeah. That's such a, when you say it, it sounds obvious, but you're right. It's like, well, let's see how often have I actually seen it happen that way or be done that way, and it's I can see how it drives results very effectively, and it's so valuable to bring that perspective in. Now, the reason I worked on it and why I added like the voice of the customer is I had a couple CFOs tell me, look, my business has drastically changed. I really need to reshape our business. And I asked them, how are you going to do that? Oh, it's easy, Mark. I mean, what would you do? I'm going to run a sales by salesman descending report, draw the line, and anybody under the line pretty much isn't going to be on the team. I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me the number one revenue person that has your top 2 accounts is your best salesperson? Well, yeah. How do you know? Did they open those 2 accounts? Well, no, they're managing them. Okay, so if I took your best person and put them into a brand new market, how would they do? Oh, you're making me uncomfortable. I don't know. I says, and then let me ask you another question that's even more important. How does your customer want to be treated right now? I just did some work for a distributor in the HVAC heating and cooling business, and they wanted to know what are their buyers wanting today in terms of service. And it really surprised us all. 60% of the buyers surveyed, we surveyed 400 of their customers, 60% said they like virtual sales. They've actually been annoyed by salespeople just dropping by for years and taking their time.
Wow. Wow.
So we have to listen to that data and adjust.
Yeah, and I want to say it was the 3 of us having this conversation, and I can't remember for sure, but we talked about that the traditional sales meeting, truly the recipient or the customer that you're trying to talk to, they really need about 10 minutes, right, to absorb the main thing that they want to get from you. And so the rest.
Now, one of the things that I teach is, every time you interact with a buyer is a time to give them value. You want to be seen as a trusted advisor. But I think it was Florida State that did the research. And what they found was they asked buyers in a typical 1-hour meeting, how many minutes were valuable to you?
Ooh.
6. And it's like, that one comedian that says, here's your sign, right? Yeah. No wonder they're not wanting to meet with us if they think most of the time is wasted. Yeah. No wonder they like virtual meetings and phone calls, because they get their answer quickly and they move on to the rest of their day. And I think one of the big reasons why so much of those meetings are not valued is the salespeople came there with the spirit to take good care of their customer. They just never were trained.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people serve before sell. It's such a different mindset. And I think the salespeople that I've seen and known over the years because I admire them so much, it's such a craft, right? And the ones that really show up and deliver value, like you said, and their whole intention, right? Because intention drives everything. Their intention is, I am here to be of service to you, to listen to you, to ask you questions, to help you solve your problems before I am going to try to sell you a damn thing. Those are the most successful salespeople, the most successful relationships. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I often speak at events with other authors, and one of my favorite is a guy named Ed Wallace. If you ever want him on your podcast, just let me know. But he wrote a book on building relationships, and he talks about worthy intent.
Ooh, I love that.
And what he talks about is, having worthy intent before you even dial the phone. It's like people say, well, Mark, you don't seem to have any call reluctance. Well, I don't. I actually think if people don't want to talk to me, it's their loss, because I can help them. I can help you particularly now if you're struggling with how to restructure your sales team, put the right people in the right roles, do training. That's my passion. That's been my life work for 36 years. But within seconds, I think we've all had those calls where the person called us didn't have worthy intent. They had commission breath, right? They're trying to, it's like, I call them commission junkies. They're trying to get their next fix, right?
Yeah.
And it's all about them getting their number, their goals. I can tell you who's, within seconds when I'm dealing with somebody like that. But actually having worthy intent is an interruption today. And I had a CEO recently, I cold called him, which was kind of fun. And he says, look, I'm a busy guy. I don't have time for you. I've got 750 employees. I says, no, I totally get it. I've been a CEO. I understand what you're saying. Can I just ask you a question? Yeah, go ahead. You got 5 minutes. I says, overall, how effective do you think your sales folks are? I know as a CEO, it used to keep me up at night wondering what they were doing out there. And he's like, well, about 30% probably need to go on to something else. The middle, they could grow, and then I've got a bunch of really successful people. I'm like, okay. 50 minutes later, after me asking him more questions, we are now talking about an engagement to help him with his team. I didn't call and say, hey, I'm trying to pitch you whatever, right? I think one of the problems I see with salespeople, particularly with Zoom, is, well, if I'm doing Zoom, I need PowerPoint, No, have a conversation.
Yeah. It all starts with a conversation. And unfortunately, we have to wrap up. We could talk all day. I think intention is everything. And I'm so glad that we're ending with that, because our intention is so aligned with yours. That's one reason that you are sitting here talking with us. And I feel so grateful. I know Ray does too, that we have connected and are becoming fast friends and colleagues. And it's because our intention of even having this podcast and yours as well, right, is to be of service to people, to have these courageous conversations. And if we can spark a thought or inspiration or, throw a brick at someone's head in a good way and get them to either learn something, try something new, do something different that moves the needle in a big way, and right now, quickly, then we've accomplished our goal, right? Because we believe in this industry as you do, and it just lights us up. So I'll end on that note. I want to say thank you so much for being here. We would love to have you back. I know that goes with the thing. And, for everyone listening, we will put all the information in the show notes. You must connect with Mark on LinkedIn for sure, and check out his podcast, check out his book. And thank you so much for listening. We value your attention and your time. And feel free to reach out if there's any topic that you would like us to have a courageous conversation about. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And sharing is caring. So pass it on to a colleague if you feel that there's value. And
remember, everybody, keep manufacturing out loud. Along with Allison and I and Mark, we need you. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to MFG Out Loud with Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore. You can subscribe and find show notes at mfgoutloud.com.